Gianna. Hi, Stephanie. Sarah Lydia from Jerusalem, up very early. Lorette, thank you so much. Yes, it is my birthday still, my English birthday. Shalom, Sarah Lydia from Jerusalem. Cinderella, thank you. Yes, it's my English birthday. I am attached to my English birthday as well as my Hebrew birthday. And my daughter, Aura, just took birthday cake out of the freezer. So we had birthday cake. Hi, Aura. I think you're watching from downstairs in the living room. Thank you, Sarah Lydia. In our family, we celebrate more than one birthday. So last week was my Hebrew birthday, and today is my English birthday. And I've had something to celebrate every day in between. I've had a lunch visit from, oh, Cindy, that's so nice. Melissa and Linda brought lunch yesterday, and we sat at separate tables, and we had the most delicious lunch, and there were actually flowers in the salad. It's been a long time since I had like purple carnations in my salad, and it was really, really nice, really, really good. And the weather this week has been heavenly here. I don't want to make you jealous, Cindy, back in Muncie, or Sarah Lydia, but last Friday it was 90, but it's going to rain over Shabbos. Hi, Barbara. How are you? So everybody can stop longing to be in California. Phyllis, I hope you're feeling good, feeling well. And welcome. Nice to see you. Okay, I'm just going to take attendance. No, I'm kidding. We're going to start in a minute. Let me find my way out story that I want to start with. So we might as well start with that right away. Okay. Good, Phyllis, you're feeling better. That's good. So I just want to wish a refuah shlema to everybody who's struggling and having a hard time. You know, people from all over the world are getting in touch with me. How are things in California? And in my world and among the people I know, thank God, everybody's doing well. You know, I know that there are a lot of people that are not doing well. I think I'm going to take off my glasses since we're so close together and I can actually see. Barbara, it's really nice to see you. Jill from Palm Springs. It's coming closer that I'm going to come to Palm Springs. I can't wait. And yes, my bubble of friends, Baruch Hashem, people I know are still being very, very cautious. I do enjoy going to the beach, so I want to encourage anybody who lives near a body of water to really take advantage and to go and enjoy water and enjoy what we can, enjoy what we can. So I'm just looking for my pen, which I don't see, but okay. So I'm going to start with a story, and then we'll go into the learning. It'll give people time to come on. Hi, Karen. So far we have San Diego, we have Texas, we have Los Angeles, Jerusalem, Pico, downstairs in my living room. We have Aura, Palm Springs. I can't wait to go back to Palm Springs. I just can't wait to go anywhere. Although I am happy in my house. Of course, I'm very lucky because I have my wonderful youngest son, Kobe, Pomona. Yes, Pomona. And, okay, so let's start. We're going to start with a little wild story. Why not? So there's a very interesting little, I can't call it a magazine because it's one page printed, but it's called Living Jewish. It's put out by Chabad. And it's like 2 pages, and it always has like a really interesting story, and it has some... It even has recipes. Hi, Jonathan. It even has recipes, and it has words from our sages and different pieces of the Parsha of the week. And it actually now has a Dear Abby section, but they don't call it Dear Abby. Let's see what they call it. For bringing questions and answers, okay? So I'm going to read you a story from this little Living Jewish. I'm sure if you went on Chabad.org, you could find it and print it up. I usually print it for Shabbos and have an interesting story. So this is the story. So there was a rabbi. His name was the Kuznitzer. You get a prize if you can say that correctly. The Kuznitzer Rebbe. And he had Hasidim, that means followers who would travel to him. And there was this one particular man who traveled to him. And his wife pushed him to go and ask the Rebbe for a blessing. They had a lot of blessings in their life, but they never had children. And they both longed for the blessing of children. And this last time that he went, his wife pushed him, you have to ask the Rebbe this time for a blessing. You just don't leave without one. So the Rebbe said to him, I could give you a blessing, but it's not going to be good news. You're going to end up a pauper. That's what you're going to have to do in exchange. And he said, I would be willing. He said, no, first you have to go home and ask your wife if she would be willing to do that. So he goes home and he asks his wife, and his wife, anything. So he goes back to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe says to him, not only will you now live in this level of being a pauper for now, but you need to travel a very far distance and go see the Choser of Lublin. He was called the Seer of Lublin, a very famous sage, and it's a very long journey, but you need to go see him. So he traveled all this distance, and he went to see the Choser of Lublin. And the Choser was known for his ability to be able to look inside, Sina, my buddy, to look inside a person's soul and to be able to see what he needed, what kind of fixing, what was going on for them, what was wrong. And he studied him. He studied the Choser Lublin, studied this man for a very long time, and he said the following to him. He said, I will tell you what the source of your childlessness is and what you need to do to correct it. And he said, many years ago, when you were a young child, you were you promised to marry a young girl. And when you matured, you decided you weren't interested anymore, and you broke off your promise. And he says you hurt her feelings, and for that reason, that is why you haven't been able to have children all these years. So he said, I want you to travel to the city of Balta, which is a very far distance from where he lived, and I want you to ask his you have to go to this woman, and you have to ask her forgiveness. So he traveled, it was to this very distant city, to Balta, and he asked around if anybody knew this woman, and nobody knew her. And he just rented a room. This is where the Rebbe told him to go, and he knew eventually he might find her. And one day he's out in the rain, and it's pouring rain, and he takes refuge in a store. And in the store there are two women, and one of them he overhears says to the other, you see that man over there? He was betrothed to me in my youth, and he deserted me. And he turns and he sees this woman dressed in the most beautiful, very wealthy, very rich clothing and fabrics, wearing beautiful jewels. And he goes over to her and she says, don't you remember me? I'm the one you were engaged to. She says, did you marry? Did you have children? And he pours his heart out to her, telling her how sorry he was for breaking the engagement and how he hasn't had children, and what could he do to atone for the pain he caused her. So she said, I lack for nothing. God has provided everything for me. But I have a brother who is in desperate need to marry off his daughter, and if you can give him 200 gold coins, I will forgive you in the merit of marrying off, in the mitzvah of marrying off a poor bride. I will forgive you, and you will be blessed with children, just like the tzaddik, just like the Seer of Lublin said. So he says, amen, but he says, I'm really anxious to get a home. Can't I give you the money and you give this to your brother instead? And he says, I've traveled so long and I'm really anxious to go home. And she says, no, it's not possible. she said, I cannot travel at this time and I can't send the money through the post. It's too dangerous. And with that, she tells him what city he's in and she walks out the door and he leaves. So he has no choice and he has to travel now far, far, far to another very distant city. And he was able to locate the brother and he introduced himself. But before he could even say why he's there, this man breaks down and he's in a state of agitation. He says, I don't know what to do. My youngest daughter is betrothed to a young man, a wealthy young man. And if I don't come up with the dowry, the wedding is off and I don't know where to turn. So this man says to him, I will give you 200 gold coins to marry off your daughter and that will cover everything. And the man couldn't believe his ears, and he says, why would you do this for me? Why would you give a total stranger so much money? And he says, I have been sent by your sister, who I met a few weeks ago in Balta. And he tells him the story that he was once betrothed to her and broke her heart. And in order to have this soul rectification of the pain he caused her, he had to come here and give this man 200 gold coins. So the brother says, what are you saying? Are you crazy? He says, my sister has been dead for 15 years. I should know. I buried her. And now the chassid was shocked. And he looked at this as a miracle from God in his behalf. So he would be able to make amends and he would be able to have children. And he gave the man the golden coins and the man blessed him to have children and great-grandchildren. So I just thought that was a wild story to start the evening with. I read it to Kobe on Shabbos. You know, I like those wild stories. They happen all the time, actually, to me. So before we start, or we actually did start. Hi, Fran. So I just wanted to make an announcement, 2 announcements. This Sunday night and Monday is my husband's yahrzeit, Shlomo Yitzhak ben Moshe. And this is really the first time that the family has not been in Israel to be by his grave, which to be in Israel and to be there it does give us comfort. And so this year, none of us can go, and we don't even know if Hindela, who is in Israel, can go because she's in Jerusalem, and she has a permit as a teacher to drive, but I don't know if they'll let her drive that far. The country is in really total lockdown. That means a person can barely go a mile away from their house. So instead, we are organized by my son-in-law, Dov. We are having a Zoom memorial service on Sunday morning, this coming Sunday morning. It will be 10 a.m. Los Angeles time. It'll be 8 p.m. Israel time. And I'm going to read off the Zoom number. If you didn't get an email, you can text me or send me an email, or I will somehow, I don't know how to use my Facebook page, but I will have one of my many assistants put it up. So if you have a pen now, I'm just going to tell you the Zoom number. The Zoom number is 466-641-6991. Again, 466-641-6991. And the password is 181818. Of course. Now, also, and we're going to have music and a few stories, and it's going to be an hour program. So it's going to start on time. It's going to start at 10. And at 11, when like the official part of this memorial gathering is over, then we'll open it up for people to say something. Oh, Sina. See, this is why Sina is the best. There she goes. It's unbelievable, Sina. My assistant, the best girl. Sina, you can come over tomorrow for a yoga class in the sunshine, okay? As your reward. Also, next Wednesday night is Tu B'Shvat. And I am doing with the Rose House and the Happy Minion and Westwood Kehila. We are doing a Tu B'Shvat Seder. It's going to be the same Zoom number that Sina has posted. And the Tu B'Shvat Seder will be starting at 7 o'clock, and it will be over about 8:20. And I will start my Wednesday night class, my Facebook class, at 8:30. Now, if I was talented enough to know how to do Zoom and Facebook together, you'd all have an advantage, but I don't know how to do that. So first we're going to do the Tu B'Shvat Seder, and we sent out an email, and if you didn't get the email and you would like to get the information, you could be in touch with me. I'll also have my best assistant, Zena, help me put it on my Facebook page, because for the Tu B'Shvat Seder, we use wine and we use grape juice and we have different fruits and different things from the land of Israel. And we really make a Seder. We say blessings and we eat, and we're going to learn the deep inner significance of Tu B'Shvat during that Tu B'Shvat Seder from 7 to about 8:20. And then at 8:30, I'm going to start a Parsha class at 8:30. No, the shir is going to be, Sina, at 8:30, not at 8, okay? So the Seder will be from 7 to, let's say, 8:30, and the class will be at 8:30. Okay, so let's start. So I want to do a few things tonight. I want to do some teaching on the Parsha, and I also want to talk about, thank you, Phyllis. I have all these wonderful friends who help me out in areas that I can't manage. So the ad for the Yurtside is on my Facebook page. Thank you so much. Really, I appreciate it, Phyllis. Okay, so I want to start off to do something on Parsha Bo. We're in Parsha Bo this week, and then we're going to talk about the Hasidic holiday of Yud Shvat, which is the 10th of the month of Shvat, which is coming up on the Shabbos, which is the day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe left the world, and the day that the Rebbe, that was our Rebbe, took over being Rebbe. So we have a lot to talk about tonight. So I want to just do a short teaching I was learning with Rabbi Raskin. If anybody wants to go on Chabad.org and to listen to his explanation of all of the different plagues, it's really fascinating. But I want to just summarize something that he had to say this week. We're not going to go into last week we talked about the plague of blood and frogs, and we didn't get to do the other 5 plagues that were in last week's Parsha. And this week we're going to talk about the Parsha of the plague of darkness and the killing of the firstborn male Egyptians. So if you want to learn about all the other plagues that we didn't talk about, it's a wonderful source, Rabbi Raskin on Chabad.org. But one of the things that he does say is that that when God told Moshe that the plagues were going to start, and he said to hit the water, and the water would turn into blood. It says Aaron was the one that hit the water, because Moshe could not hit the water with his staff, because the water protected him. How did he live? Is that his sister put him in a little boat, a little basket boat in the Nile River, and that saved his life from being killed by the Egyptians. And then he was taken in by Batya, Pharaoh's daughter, and his life was saved. So he couldn't hit the water with his staff. And also when it was the plague of the lice, and he was told to hit the dust, it was Aaron again who hit the dust with his staff, because the dirt and the dust took the Egyptian that Moses had killed, who beat the Jew to death. So it was in last week's Parsha. There was a Jewish man, and he was being beaten to death, really, by this Egyptian, and Moshe caused the Egyptian to die, and he buried him in the sand, in the dirt, and therefore he couldn't hit the dirt either. And Aaron had to hit the dirt because the dirt also protected him. So we learn from this that if someone protects us, that you cannot do something to harm that person, that you can't embarrass or belittle that person. You cannot step over a person who helped you. We learn from our sages in the Torah. And we learn this from these first three plagues. And it says each of us can learn from the first three plagues a lesson how to live our life. The first was the plague of blood. You have to have passion in your life for how you live according to Torah, how you study Torah, and how you celebrate the mitzvahs. The second is we had the plague of frogs, which represented coldness. Don't be excited by worldly things. Save your passion for things of Torah. And the third thing we learned from the plague of the lice is don't be a parasite. Don't be lax. Do your best to be productive. Do your best to bring redemption into the world. Give back to the world. Just don't be a parasite. So we go on to learn something more about the plagues that took place in Egypt. It says they were multifaceted, meaning they hit all levels of a person's being. Hi, Karen. How these plagues enabled the Jews to leave a slave mentality and to go to a place, an inner place, a place where they could be a free people. And it was a process. And it said that they benefited from this refuah, from this healing on all levels also, on the emotional, on the spiritual, on the social, and all levels they were changed by the plague in a positive way for the Jews and in a negative way for the Egyptians. Each plague lasted a week, and then the warning was for 3 weeks. So actually, the whole series of plagues lasted for 10 months, just like we've had 10 months of Corona right now. So one of the things we learned from the Alter Rebbe is to live with the times, which is to live with the Torah. And hopefully it's signifying the end. Like at the end of the 10 months, the plagues stopped and the Jews were able to leave Egypt. And we want to leave the Egypt that we're in. So, okay. So, what we expected in the past is not what it is in the future. I have a grandson, Baruch Hashem, my grandson Mendel, who's getting married, and it's actually not clear where he's getting married or when he's getting married, because from place to place, the bride is from South Africa. Is the country open? Is it closed? Who can come? Who can't come? There are many, many details. There's a foundation that we're standing on that we only can have trust in Hashem and know that Hashem is guiding us. God is guiding us every step in the way, and that's where we have to put our trust. Not in the catering hall. Okay, so it says the first 7 plagues that we experienced in last week's Parsha were pointing to this freedom of choice, how we live our life, how we move forward in our life. And I heard this story from Rebbetzin Friedman from Jerusalem, and she tells a story about the Rizhiner Rebbe, that one of his followers came to him and told him that he was told that if he does deep spiritual work, deep avoda for 30 days, then he'll merit to have what's called Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, to be able to see totally in a godly way. So the Rizhiner tells a story about the Baal Shem Tov, and he said the Baal Shem Tov had horses and a driver, and whenever he had to go on a mission, he would call his driver, they would take the horses, and they would go. The first time they would make a stop would be at one inn, and they would feed the horses. The second time they made a stop, it would be at another inn, and they would feed the horses. And then the third time they stopped at an inn to feed the people. So something happens, he calls all his people together, and he says, it's time, we need to go, and they hook up the horses, and he tells his driver, just fly, don't stop, just fly. So they pass the first inn, and the horses are expecting to stop and eat, and they go, okay, we're probably going to eat at the second inn. And they pass the second inn because they're flying, and he says, I don't know what happened. I guess we're no longer horses. I guess we're going to stop at the third inn, and now we're people, and we're going to get to eat at the third inn. And then the carriage flies past the third inn, and they go, oh my gosh, we didn't even stop at the third, and I guess now we're angels, and we can eat on the way that angels eat. And finally, they stop at their destination where they're going, and there's a trough of food for the horses, and they go to eat, and they eat like horses. So he says, the Rebbe says that at the end of the day, do you stay the same? After that 30-day period that this person was working deeply on his spiritual, his avoda, his spiritual practice, and then he said, I was waiting and I didn't have this Ruach HaKodesh, this divine inspiration at the end of it, and I did my 30 days of work. So the Rishoners are saying, at the end of this period of time, did you make a change? Or are you the same? Are you still that horse that's waiting for the food from the first inn? Or was there something about you in that time of spiritual progression that changed? It says that we have to take our spiritual life seriously. And you know what? And in the times that we're in, that is really the most that we can do. I mean, many of us have much more time and much more opportunity on our hands to pursue things of this nature and of this spiritual nature. And are we taking advantage of it, or are we just letting the time go and bemoaning the time that's missing, instead of using the time in a different way, in a more productive way? Okay, so now we're going to go on to one more part. I mean, not one more, many more parts, but hold on. Okay, I have to go open here. Okay, so now we're coming into the plague of darkness. So I'm going to read you from the Chumash, and then we're going to do the commentaries on it. So it says, Moshe raised his hand toward the sky, and there was an opaque darkness in Egypt for 3 days, and no Egyptian man could see his brother, even by firelight. But the darkness did not disrupt or obstruct the Israelites' vision. It says that during these 3 days of darkness, the Israelites who did not want to go out of Egypt, that 4/5 of the population died. That is correct. You heard correctly, 4/5. And it says it happened when the Egyptians could not see it happening, in that plague of darkness. And it says because they didn't want the Egyptians to think that the Jews were dying in the same way that the Egyptians were. And for the next 3 days, the darkness became so palpable that whoever was sitting couldn't even stand, and whoever was standing couldn't even sit. And also the Israelites would take note of where all the possessions were in their dwelling. And it says, and there was light for Jews in their dwelling. So before we go on, I just want to also say that I want to dedicate, besides to the healing of everybody who is ill, I want to dedicate this class to the Elias HaNeshama, the elevation of the soul of Lei Ber Yaakov ben Chaim Svi HaKohen. Tonight is his yurtzeit. He was a very old friend of ours, and he's actually in Sfat, buried right next to Shlomo. So, and tonight is his yurtzeit, so I want to dedicate the class also for the highest aliyah of his neshama. Okay, so let's continue. So it says, the Jews who did not want to leave died. So this is very interesting, because it said that God did not force anyone to leave Egypt that didn't want to. And when the Israelites chose to remain in Egypt, that the people that chose to remain were denying the purpose of their existence, because they had a purpose. It wasn't just to live a life there. The purpose was eventually to go out in the Exodus and to serve God. And it says that this process, there was a purification of the Jewish people during this process. And it says, in contrast, the future the future redemption and the last exile, which we are in now, that even those who have no consciousness that they would even want to be redeemed will be redeemed. If anybody heard that song, No Jew Will Be Left Behind, we're taking everybody with us. So it says the Jews of the Exodus were able to choose not to be redeemed because they had a different connection with God. At that time, it was a natural connection, like one between a parent and a child. So God says to Pharaoh, my Pharaoh, for those who don't speak Paro language, Pharaoh, the firstborn son is Israel, and I'm telling you to send forth my son. So it says parents and children are bound naturally to each other. And sometimes, and most of the time they're inseparable, but sometimes it comes to happen that a child can choose not to honor this connection and even to rebel against this connection. So they have free choice and they exercise that connection. And at the time of the Jews being in Egypt, they had free choice, and 4/5 of the population exercised the choice that they were not going to go with God. They were not going to be part of the Israelite nation. But the difference happened is when the Torah was given. So when God gave the Torah, he established a covenant that was that transcended anything that existed previously, which means the natural connection. And it says when we exercise our free will, we reveal our essence. And that is the level that God connected to the Jewish people, essence to essence, which means we're transcending our nature. And he gave us the Torah, and then from then on, we were bound together in a very different way. And he rooted us in his essence, and it's deeper than a connection a natural connection between a parent and a child. And because once we were rooted in the essence of God, we became one with God. And from then on, it became impossible to sever that connection with God. We might lose it. It might be buried under a lot of dirt and dust and sand, and we don't see it, but it's never severed. And we go through, and we might go through the motions of being opposed, and we might even try to do things that go against the will of God, but this is only on a superficial level. And sooner or later, that inner essence, that inner desire, that inner spirit will kick in and make us all worthy of being redeemed and wanting to be redeemed. And it says there was light for all the Israelites in their dwellings, even when there was darkness for the Egyptians. And the Egyptians thought light and darkness were two opposing deities. But God caused light and dark to occur simultaneously so they could see that nature is actually ruled by one supreme power. So just to continue about the plague of darkness a little bit, this darkness lasted for 3 days, and it says for all of the Israelites, it was light in their dwellings where they dwelled. And during these 3 days, God gave the Jews the opportunity to go into the homes of the Egyptians. And they looked here and they looked there, and there was a light that was illuminating them. And they saw in the plague of darkness, they were able to see through things, and they saw where all the gold and the silver and the jewels and everything was put. And when they went out of Egypt, they were able to ask the Egyptians for these things because they were able to see through the light that illuminated for them where they stood in these dark homes. They were able to see where things were hidden, and they didn't take them. They asked the Egyptians, and it was very significant that they were asking for it and they didn't take it. And you might have a question. Hi, Shoshana. Thank you. Happy secular birthday. I love my secular birthday because it makes me think of my mother, because my mother loved birthday cards. My mother used to put up every birthday card in the world. So I appreciate all the greetings on this day also, as well as my Hebrew birthday. But it says that the Jews had worked as slaves for the Egyptians. So you would think probably they weren't even, with all the gold, jewels, and items they collected, it probably didn't even come close to the value of what the work they did. But it says, to the Jews there was light where they dwelled. There was a supernatural light that they could see everywhere into the homes of the Egyptians. So it says that our lives are about fulfilling what God wants. That's how we have to look at our life. Are we fulfilling the purpose for which we were created? Are we doing the will of God in what we're being asked to do? And the Midrash tells us that we can take the limitations of the world and we can use the limitations and we can make that unlimited. And that there was miraculous light. So it says the miraculous was the darkness and the natural was the light. And how do we come to see that? Because we want anything that's miraculous. We don't want to rely on miracles. We want everything to be done by the natural order of life. So when we were learning about the Alter Rebbe's yurtzeit a few weeks ago, we talked about the story of when the Alter Rebbe was being taken for interrogation from the prison to the interrogating room. And he had to be rowed across a river. And it was the time of the full moon. And he wanted to say the special blessing over the moon. And he asked the boat driver to stop. And the boat driver laughed at him and said, "You're a prisoner. Are you kidding? I'm not stopping for you." And then the boat stopped. So the boat driver said, the captain said to the Alter Rebbe, "Okay, I guess say your prayer." And he says, "No, start the boat and now stop it." And the ship, it was a little boat, probably a rowboat. The boat captain did that. And he realized that the Rebbe was a holy man and he asked him for a written blessing. And the Rebbe gave him a blessing for long life, and he had that blessing. And in the class I taught, I even told who had seen that blessing, but I don't remember now. So his Chassidim asked him, "Why did you do that? Why didn't, when he stopped the boat, you just say the blessing?" And he said, "Because Torah and mitzvahs have to be performed in the natural world. To do them in a miraculous way is no big deal, but to do them through natural order, that is the purpose of creation." So it says, this is what this is what we should aim for. That in the natural, we light up the darkness. We light up the darkness in a natural way, not in a supernatural way. So there are two types of spiritual work. One is we live in a luminous light. We create that light and we dispel that light through the world as we go into the world and we elevate the world. And how do we do this? By starting and ending our day with holiness. We elevate our life. So this is so important. And we see this purpose in how we learn, how we do mitzvahs, how we live in a Torah way. And we know that from Rashi says that there's a light that takes us through darkness and even higher. And what is that light? That light is being bound up one with God. And this level, the transcendent level, will make a difference. And we have to elevate the sparks. There are sparks everywhere in the world. I volunteer to go to the farthest corners of the world and elevate those sparks. Anybody coming with me? So our purpose is through the natural world. How do we elevate the sparks through the natural world and bring us to a place where we and God are unified? And the Lubavitcher Rebbe in 1981 said that we are living in a time of double darkness, and we see God, that he is giving us our lives in miraculous ways to carry out the will of God. And I am sure that many of us feel that there's really miraculous ways. If we have survived till now in a time of tremendous darkness for the world, and where people, many people we know and around us are getting sick, and we're able to maintain our strength and our enthusiasm and our devotion and caring about people and reaching out, that's elevating the world. That's bringing holiness into our own personal lives. So in this parsha, we are told we're coming to the this parsha is about the last two plagues. It's about the Exodus. It's about the Passover, eating the Paschal sacrifice. There's many fascinating things to learn in this week's parsha. We're going to focus now on this one little piece. So we were commanded to take a lamb. A lamb was considered a god of the Egyptians on the 10th of the month of Nisan. Remember, Nisan is the month that Passover falls in, and it is the first month of the year. And we should keep it at home for several days, and then to offer it on the 14th as a Passover sacrifice. So why was it necessary to take it on the 10th of Nisan? And our sages explained we wanted to arouse the curiosity of the Egyptians, because the Egyptians would see their god, these lambs kept in our homes, and ask, what are you doing? Why do you have them there? And that the Jews would be able to answer without fear, we are keeping this lamb here in order to slaughter it and to offer it as a sacrifice. So the fact that the Egyptians worshiped the lamb and it was their idol, nonetheless, God demanded that the lamb be kept in the home for 4 days, and that the questions of the Egyptians should be answered openly with strength, and that we are going to slaughter them and we are going to offer it up to God. And this inner strength and what we call Mesirat Nefesh. So Mesirat Nefesh is the ability to have self-sacrifice, is the ability to go beyond your normal and your natural ability to reach a transcendent state within yourselves, within ourselves, to push ourselves beyond a level that we think we really can do. So this inner strength and Mesirat Nefesh on the part of the Jewish people, that means that they were unaffected by the fear of presenting the Egyptians that here is your God, here is something that represents your God, and we are going to sacrifice this on this such and such a day, and to be able to say it straight up. And it says that at the time of the Exodus, the Jews were what's called naked of mitzvahs. It says naked and bare. And it said that so we were coming like fresh, and here we're having the strength to stand up and saying we're taking your God and we're going to sacrifice it. So God provided the Jews with this mitzvah of the Pesach sacrifice to clothe them, because mitzvahs are called garments of the soul. Thought, speech, and action are the garments of the mitzvahs, and they clothe us just like clothing covers our body. And by the merit of this mitzvah of the Paschal sacrifice, compounded by the Mesirat Nefesh, by the self-sacrifice in taking the God of Egypt and right in their face telling them we're going to slaughter it, that by the fulfillment of all this is what redeemed Israel from Egypt. So the Torah is saying to us, as in the days of your coming out of Egypt, I will show the people marvelous things. And this is referring to the future redemption. We still just have to hold on. We just have to hold on. We have to do the best we can, because we have been promised that the future redemption is coming. And why shouldn't we believe that promise? That we have a choice and we can choose to go forward in that direction. So it says, just as this Exodus that we're learning about in the Chumash was the result of strength and commitment and self-sacrifice, so too the future redemption, which is coming to us, like all of you and me and the world today, that it will be through strength and through self-sacrifice. every mitzvah has to be filled with strength and determination, and in particular, the mitzvah of Ahavas Yisrael, love of your fellow Jew. And this is a fundamental principle in the Torah, and we can observe this with a lot of strength and a lot of energy. And sometimes we have to work very hard on ourselves to have it, because in the Haggadah for Passover, it says that whoever is hungry, let them come and eat. And whoever is hungry is referring actually to what it's saying, to whoever is hungry. It's not referring only to the people that you really like, not to the people that you want around you, but it's to cultivate the ability to expand your heart, to expand your, the love, and really include everyone. This previous Sunday was the Shloshim for Rabbi Yerachmiel Stillman, who is a beloved Chabad rabbi. He came with my husband in the beginning and opened up the Chabad house, and they worked together in all their first endeavors in Los Angeles, and they were very opposite in their dress, but united in their goal and their heart. And their goal was this quality of Ahavas Yisrael, is to include everyone, to love everyone, to just have that open-heartedness and draw people in. And you see just how important that is in the world. And this is a main mitzvah that all of us have been given and that we all have the strength to do. And it says that and sometimes, like talking to a child that needs to learn something or doesn't listen, you don't give up, especially if it's your child. You don't give up. You say it this way and you say it that way. And that's how we have to be for each other. We can't just walk away if somebody doesn't get it, but we say it again, and only with words of kindness. And it says that we have to speak gently and we have to speak with composure. It says from the book of Ecclesiastes, it says, the words of the wise spoken in quiet are heard more than the cry of a ruler among fools. And it says that words coming from the heart of the speaker will enter the heart of the listener. And it goes on to say, when you're not successful, that you never give up, as Chaya is telling us. You never give up. The fault is in us. I remember once my son Shmuley, who is, for all those you who know Shmuley, I don't have to say anything else, but I remember he was like in 4th grade and I was in his school, and I happened to be in the office bringing something, and the secretary said to me, I'm not sure that you know Shmuley's teacher. I think it was his 4th grade teacher. This is Mr. So-and-so, And I said, hi, nice to meet you. And he said, Shmuley is really a lebedik, meaning a lively kid. And I said to him, it didn't sound so positive. I said, do you want me to speak to him? And he goes, absolutely not. He said, I'm not. He said, if he's lively in a way that he's not learning, then there's something I'm doing wrong. It's not something that he's doing wrong. So we have to know that when words don't come from the heart, then perhaps that's why the other person is not affected and they're not hearing it. That we can pray, we can say a psalm, we could give a little charity, whatever. If you want to accomplish a goal and you want your words from your heart to go into somebody else's heart, then there's preparation and there's steps and there's sincerity that we have to take to make it so. So it says, at the time of the Exodus, Israel's vigorous refusal to be affected by the Egyptians led them to leaving the land of Egypt and taking with them Egyptians' gold and silver. And it says there was one survivor from all the Egyptians, and that was Paro, who ended up in Nineveh and suffered even more. But that's for the sequel. Okay, so now we're going to just go on a little more in the Parsha. Okay, so it says that when Moses delivered the final plague, God's message concerning the plague of the firstborn to Pharaoh, he also told him when the plague would take place, and that was at midnight. But in case that the Pharaoh's astrologers would misjudge the time and not realize the time, Moses said the plague will take place around midnight. He didn't say exactly midnight. So it says on the surface, it's a little difficult to comprehend. The question is asked, why was it necessary to inform Pharaoh of the time at which the plague of the firstborn would begin? It says Moshe could have said, God will bring this plague without saying when. And it goes on to say the fact that Moshe did mention the time means the plague had a unique connection to that time of midnight, so much that Moshe had to tell Pharaoh when it would take place. So I just want to, okay. So we know it was going to take place exactly at midnight, and we're going to go on to see why, but he didn't say it in that way just so the astrologers who were calculating wouldn't calculate their time incorrectly and say his time was incorrect. So we know that night is divided into two halves. There's from dusk to midnight and from midnight to light. And at dusk, the sun sinks deeper below the horizon and the sky becomes progressively darker from midnight to dawn. And the sun begins then to rise, to ascend, and the sky becomes lighter. So the first part of the night is connected with God's attribute of severity and judgment, which means the sphere of Givora. And the second half of the night, when it's become lighter, is associated with God's attribute of kindness, which is chesed. So midnight is the exact midpoint between the beginning and the end of the night, and it's associated with neither attribute. Midnight is a theoretical construct rather than an actual span of time, because the moment before midnight is part of the first half of the night, and the moment after midnight is part of the second half. And it says, even though midnight indicates a certain time, it takes up no time. It's beyond time. And its transcendence is that there are two opposite halves of the night. And in that point, they negotiate a transition from one quality to another. And it says that the great significance of midnight is a moment when God's transcendence is revealed. And the slaying of the firstborn had to occur exactly at midnight because it was the final stroke of the Exodus. And God had to reveal his transcendence beyond the laws of nature. And so a little bit, this is the essence of midnight. So we're going to go on a little further in a deeper explanation in this sikha, this teaching from the Rebbe. So the nature of the plague of the firstborn and its differences from other plagues has two distinctions. One is, in contrast to the other plagues, it was necessary in this plague for the Jews to mark the doorposts with the blood of the circumcision and the blood of the paschal sacrifice. This was the blood that was put on the doorposts of the house. Even when I was in my Reformed Sunday school, I don't know how much I learned, but I remember learning that. I also learned about kosher, but we were served shrimp at the Kiddush. But that was quite confusing to a young child who had aspirations to try to figure life out. But I remember learning about the blood. I guess it's so dramatic. Blood on the doorposts and the angel of death passing over the house. That's my really Jewish memory. So it says this was to prevent the plague from harming the Jews. So that was the first difference. The second is God ordered the Jews, no person shall go outside of the entrance of their house till morning. Kind of sounds like now. It sounds like familiar. Like we don't have that in a strict form here, but in Israel they certainly do. Actually, I have a few grandchildren that are studying in Sfat this year, which makes it even doubly hard that this week I would have been in Israel and been right there in Sfat. But I know my granddaughter, they keep having one girl and then one girl and then one girl that keeps getting the virus, and therefore they have to keep being locked in. And they have police that come, and the girls have to be out on the porch and they count them, and they make sure that everyone is there and that they haven't left. So they didn't leave their house. There was no possibility of leaving their house. And it says here that everyone had to remain home throughout the night because the agent of destruction was given permission to devastate. And it would not differentiate between the righteous and the wicked. And if the Jews had gone out, they too would have been harmed. I mean, it's so, we live with the Torah readings. We see how our times today are so connected to this. It doesn't matter if you're a righteous person or you're a wicked person, or if you're a successful person or a schlepper, or if you're rich or you're poor. This plague that the world is going through devastates everybody. And really the only way to stay protected, or a way to stay protected, is to stay in your homes and not have people there. So it says that this agent of destruction was given license to devastate, also to the other plagues, but the Jews did not require special protection in the other plagues. So why was the plague of the firstborn so unique in this regard? And why was it necessary for the Jews to remain at home and to make a sign with the blood of the circumcision and the paschal sacrifice? So that is the question that's being asked here. Most of the plagues affected only the financial resources of the Egyptians or their comfort. Even when a plague such as the plague of the wild animals brought death as well as financial loss, it says there was always a constraint on the destruction. For instance, certain plagues only involve certain agents of destruction, such as frogs, lice, or the like, and they were given permission to harm and kill Egyptians only according to their natural tendencies. There was not unlimited destruction. It says even the plague which killed the livestock was limited. It affected only livestock, and it affected only 5 types: horses, donkeys, camels, oxen, and sheep. And that's it. And every other type of animal survived. So it also says that the limited nature of the destruction conveyed by the previous plagues is also reflected in the following verse. The flax and the barley were destroyed, since the barley was ripe. The wheat and the spelt were not destroyed because they are late in sprouting. So you can see it wasn't universal destruction let wild, gone loose, gone wild. With regard to the final plague, however, the Egyptian firstborn were slain without any restraint, and agent of destruction was given license to devastate, and therefore it was necessary for the Jews to take steps to protect themselves, or else they also would be harmed. And there's a deeper distinction between the final plague and the 9 earlier ones. The intent of the earlier plagues was primarily not to punish the Egyptians, but to generate an awareness of the presence of God. So it says, so that you can tell how I perform miraculous signs among them, and you will know that I am God. And then again it is written, through this you will know that I am God. And again, so that you will know I am God. And again, so that you will know that there is none like me. Therefore, there was no need for the plagues to affect the Jews, because the Jews already had an awareness of God. But this plague of the firstborn was different in this regard. In the 9 other plagues, few people actually perished. The vast majority could still come to a level of awareness of godliness. But with the plague of the firstborn, the intent was the firstborn die, and not that their appreciation of God's power should be enhanced. That was clear cut. This is it. Up to here and no more. Now there's going to be retribution. Now there's going to be punishment. So since the intent of this plague was punishment, the attribute of judgment might have argued, how different are these Jews from the Egyptian firstborn? For the Jews in Egypt also sunk to a very low level of conduct. It says that the Jews were on the 49th level of impurity. So why were they saved? And the Midrash states there are worshipers of idols, and among the Jews also there were worshipers of idols. And so it is possible that the agent of destruction, the extension of this attribute of Gevurah, of judgment, would not have been able to distinguish between the Egyptians and the Jews. And it is written, I will pass through Egypt. I will smite every firstborn. I will perform acts of judgment. I am God. And our sages conclude from this that God himself was the one who smote the Egyptians. We say, and we say this in the Haggadah, I am not an angel. I and no other. But it goes on to say that this does not discount the influence of the agent of destruction. That agent was also present and could make accusations against the Jewish people. Therefore, it was necessary for the Jewish people to take protective measures. And what were these measures? Number 1, not going out of their homes. Number 2, if a Jew went out, because if a Jew went outside, there would be no distinction made. With regard to this, everyone, Jews and Egyptians, were alike, so a sign would not help. The only alternative was to stay inside. It's so interesting, that this is when we're reading this Torah portion. Placing a sign on their homes, God promised, I will pass over you. And that the agent of destruction was not to be given license in these places. And so there could be a distinction made between the Jew and the Egyptians. And you might come to ask why. And we're going to see why. Because the Jew has a purpose to fulfill in this world. And at any moment, even a person who has gone astray, even a person who is engaged in behavior that's the opposite of holiness, even that person can do tshuva and can change and can fulfill their purpose in the world. So why did the sign the Jews placed on their doors protect them? So the plague of the firstborn had its source in a level of godliness that is above the limits of the spiritual worlds, meaning that there was what we call the Seder of Hishtalshalis, which means the order of evolution, the chain-like progression of spiritual worlds, the spiritual cosmos. There is something of that nature that exists. And this level transcends the level of judgment. It does not have any place for accusations. And it says that rational arguments can't affect these levels. This level of godliness that transcends the order of creation, these levels, which were the source for the plague of the firstborn, are beyond reason and will not be affected by rational accusations. Also, this is why the plague took place at midnight, because there's a transcendent level of godliness that is revealed at midnight, like we spoke of before, that transition between judgment, gevurah, and kindness, chesed. Again, gevurah is revealed, judgment is revealed in the first half of the night when darkness increases. When kindness comes in, the night continues, but signs of light appear and increase. But at midnight, these two opposite qualities are fused together because there is a level of godliness that transcends the limits of the order of creation, and this is revealed at midnight. And we know that the fusion of two opposites is possible only through an influence that goes above the limits of both. That's what mediators do on a certain level. Hopefully, the good mediators go above the level of both of the people that they're mediating to fuse these two opposite opinions together and to come out with one whole healthy way to be. At the time of the plague of the firstborn, God's essential love for the Jewish people was revealed, a love that transcends all reason and logic. God loves the Jewish people, for they are his children. And it is written, you are the children to God, your Lord. And a father's love for his children is an essential bond which cannot be challenged by logic or complaint. You know, when you see these people that do horrific crimes and their mothers, you know, he was such a good boy, he's my son, there is an essential bond in these situations. It says, by telling Pharaoh that the plague of the firstborn would take place at midnight, Moshe was alluding to the fact that there would be a revelation that would transcend the limits of the order of creation. There would be something so transcendent that would happen at this moment. And it says that if this had been told to the Egyptians, Pharaoh and his wise men, his astrologers, would not have believed that a plague whose intent was to destroy evil could make a distinction between the Jews and the Egyptians, that it would not affect the Jews because their conduct, many Jews had a conduct that was similar to the Egyptians. But Moshe informed him that it won't affect the Jews because of the presence of a transcendent light, and that this transcendent light would shine on the Jews' essential essence link with God, because there is an essential essence link. So it says, although the essential bond between the Jews and God would be revealed, still the Jews had to place a sign on their doorposts. Why? Because all the influence that God gives us is drawn down to the earth from our divine service. Even those transcendent levels of creation are dependent on what we do in the world. We can't just as much as I would like to kick back and sit in the mineral water and take in the sun, that's not what we're going to do in order to draw godliness down into the world. Although today I got a birthday greeting from a friend that I met. She told me it was 19 years ago. I was doing a spa retreat at the Lido Palms, and I was in the water in the morning, the hot water, and there was another woman, 2 women in the water, and they were going to have to be leaving the hotel because I had booked the whole hotel. And we started to talk at that moment, and now it's 19 years later, and we're still talking to today. And so I guess you can accomplish a lot of good work while you're taking in the sun in a hot mineral tub in Desert Hot Springs. So, but it says God's essential love is there and perfect at all times. That essential love is not dependent on our divine service. But what is dependent on our divine service is to reveal that level of love and incorporate it within the world. That is the part that we contribute. This divine service that draws down this transcendent love, this must resemble that love. It must resemble that transcendence. It also has to transcend reason, meaning it goes beyond the limits of our conscious powers. So this is why the signs that the Jews placed on their home on the night of the plague of the firstborn, what did they place? The blood of the circumcision and the blood of the Paschal sacrifice. Both of these reflect a level reflect a connection with God that transcends logic. You know, is it logical to take the blood of the circumcision and the blood of the Paschal lamb and paint your doorposts with it? So the mitzvah of circumcision reflects such a bond because it is established with a boy at the age of 8 days when he has no control over his intellectual capabilities. It says that bond for a girl is established at birth. Similarly, the mitzvah, the commandment of bringing the Paschal offering, requires what we call self-sacrifice, mesiras nefesh, that transcends logic, for sheep were worshipped by the Egyptians. And the Jews held those animals, like we said in the beginning of the class, for 4 days and told the Egyptians they were going to sacrifice their animals that were their gods to God. And this required a level of mesiras nefesh, self-sacrifice. By manifesting that level, the Jews brought about the expression of God's essential love for the Jewish people, a love which transcends reason. So they were able to bring that. They were standing up for God. They were taking this lamb. It was a god of Egypt. They were saying to the Egyptians, you know, they didn't know that the Egyptians weren't going to just pounce on them and kill them for desecrating their God. But they stood up and they said, this is what we're going to do. Which transcended all level of reason, and this was the manner that it brought into the consciousness, so to speak, of God, this essential love he has for the Jewish people. So we know that it was in the merit of their faith, of our ancestors, that they were redeemed. And the Jews believed in Moshe's promise of redemption, and the people believed. They accepted Moshe's promise that God had taken notice of his people, and that enabled the promise to be really realized. You know, we're promised Mashiach. We're promised it. We're promised it by all our sages. We're promised it by all our rebbes. We're promised Mashiach. In another source, it explained the Jews were redeemed in the merit of the blood of circumcision and the blood of the paschal sacrifice. And we know this from the verse, through your bloods you will live. So it comes here to mention faith, circumcision, and the paschal sacrifice. They all share a common factor. They all defy logic. Faith begins where reason ends, especially when you talk about the redemption from Egypt. If you looked at the rules of nature, if you looked at what was going on at that time in the country, it was impossible. It says that not even one slave escaped Egypt. How was it possible for 600,000 men, women, and children to go out? Who could even think of such a thing? But yet the Jews believed Moshe. They believed that they were going to be taken out of Egypt. It says they were broken. They were broken people. They had been engaged in hard labor and useless labor. And they had so much grief by all the decrees of Pharaoh, and they saw the death of their young children. And it says that still they believed in God's promise, that in Moshe's promise, that God would redeem them from evil. And they had this simple faith which transcended reason, and this simple faith called forth God's essential love, which also transcends all limits. So it says that this essential love caused a chain within this concept of the creation, the order of creation. And it says that in order for the Jews to be redeemed, they had to show such a change also in their divine service. How they would manifest this essential connection through deed, and this was accomplished through the deeds of the paschal sacrifice and the circumcision, because both of these, like faith, transcended reason. So we have the verse, and at midnight God slew every firstborn in Egypt. And it says that there's two opinions. One was it was the Creator who divided the night. And the other talks in a different direction, but both directions refer to God, but they talk about different attributes of God. So, which we will skip over for now. So the question is, why did God perform this special miracle of dividing the night? So we're taught that elevating nature does more than reveal God's transcendence. And here's the thing that so much relates for us. It shows how nature itself can become a vessel for the divine light which transcends it. That everything can become a container for the divine light. So the last of the 10 plagues was the beginning of the Exodus, and the ultimate purpose of the Exodus was the giving of the Torah. Because it says, when you will lead the people out of Egypt, you will serve God on the mountain. And the intent and the giving of the Torah is the fusion of godliness which transcends the natural order and reveals it within the natural order, like the story of the Alter Rebbe in saying the blessing on the moon in the boat. So that we will come to see this fusion of the spiritual and the physical world as an open revelation. It says that Egypt was not nullified completely, because even after the Exodus and until today, it remains a country. But it says at the height of its power, no one could escape it. And yet, every single Jew marched out. And this reflects a revelation of godliness that transcends nature and occurs within nature. So the revelations that transcend the order of creation were drawn down through the circumcision and the paschal sacrifice. And it says that they were intended to permeate the people's consciousness, affecting even their lowest potentials. It says before the footnote, it's talking about these two different mitzvahs were commanded before the giving of the Torah, when the world was still in a contaminated state. And there was a very important reason to separate the lower realms from the higher realms. And that at that time, the Torah and its mitzvahs did not permeate the material world. This was before the Exodus and before the giving of the Torah. So their observance in term of the circumcision and the paschal sacrifice generated the potential for this contamination of the world to cease at the giving of the Torah. It laid the way for the purification in the receiving of the Torah. So it says that the divine service connected with the circumcision is to establish an eternal, transcendent bond with God in the actual flesh. And it says, and in a more encompassing manner, the divine service that was created and what it accomplished by the paschal sacrifice. Again, because that sacrifice involved a lamb, which is a material entity outside the human sphere altogether. Because it had not, the circumcision was in the flesh, even though it comes to say it was in the end of the flesh, at the end of the torso. But the paschal sacrifice was outside that realm of human sphere altogether. And the Egyptians, it says, worshiped the lamb. This was the entity which the Jews employed as a means of expressing their self-sacrifice, of the means of making a statement moving forward. The entire intent of the sacrifice was that it to be eaten. And it says that every part had to be eaten, and families had to, if you had a small family, you had to join with other families and neighbors, that none of it could be wasted, that every part had to be eaten. And it says, and what do we know about eating? Eating is one of the activities in which a human resembles an animal. Animals eat also. So it says the purpose of the sacrifice was to express on this lowly level, a level of faith and self-sacrifice which transcends, again, reason and logic. It says true freedom requires not only for the soul to be free from restraints of the body and the animal soul, but the body and the animal self itself should be free. So it's not that we want to free ourselves from our animal soul, that the essence of the animal soul also should be freed. And freedom implies that one's environment, even those aspects of your environment which conceal godliness, should be affected by the revelation of the soul. And this leads to true freedom of the soul, the body, the animal soul, and the environment. This revelation that's brought about by faith. Man, this is so timely. We all need so much to connect to this level of faith. Why? Because faith reveals the soul. And it says, and this faith was expressed in the mitzvah of circumcision and in the paschal sacrifice, which involved offering an entity beyond the human sphere, part of our environment. So it says that we were purifying it, we were elevating these things of physicality. And this power to descend and affect inferior lights of existence comes from a very high place. The place that reveals godliness, and it reveals godliness so much that it's even revealed in the flesh. And it says, and the power of the Paschal sacrifice is even greater because it draws godliness into a realm that is outside the human sphere. So this facilitates the attainment of true freedom. It goes on to say that for as long as one has not taken the great wealth of Egypt out of exile by refining one's environment, one has not left exile, and your experience of freedom is lacking. So it says that this explains why the lamb that was selected for the Paschal sacrifice had to be set aside 4 days before the sacrifice so that it could be inspected. Because what do we know about a sacrifice? A sacrifice brings a person closer to God, as indicated by the connection for the Hebrew word for sacrifice, which is korban, and the word karov, which means close. So the inspection of the sacrifice is intended to ensure a person's approach to God is perfect, without a blemish. And how do we do it? By refining our portion of the world as it is expressed through the sacrifice. So it says when a person does not do their part of refining their environment, even if they refine all the powers of their soul, including their lowest potential, it will be possible that the essence of their soul will still be in exile and distant from godliness. So we're responsible. You can't say I'm not responsible. You know, it's interesting. When I was in India, it was one night my daughter and I, Nahamedina, we stayed up very late. It's right next to all the really nice hotels by the water in Mumbai. There were slums, and the slums remind me of like Far Rockaway, where, you know, it's those hot nights and all the ladies are sitting, you know, with their stockings rolled down to their feet, and they're sitting fanning themselves in their chairs in front of their house. And here all the ladies were out in front of their houses in their plastic chairs, and it's like in the hot, it must be so hot in their little huts, and they all invited us to sit with them, and we sat up all night talking. And it's so interesting because they were complaining about that people in the houses that don't clean in front of their house, that make think that their personal environment, that they could do with what they want, and how that they go and they clean it up for them. They go down these Indian streets and they don't want their part of the world to look the way other people do. And here it's saying that also, that not only is it about refining yourself and your own soul powers, but it also is about refining your environment. That even the lowest potential, because our souls will still be in exile if the environment around us is also in exile. So it says the exodus from Egypt came in the merit of the Jews' faith, and their faith that even went into the lowest levels, that encompassed the lowest levels, and even entities that were outside humanity, the human sphere, which is the eating of the Paschal sacrifice. And it says that the future, and it's giving us hope, that the future redemption will come in the merit of faith, despite the overwhelming concealment of godliness in this present exile. And we can arouse that simple level of faith in the coming of Mashiach, because Mashiach is here. He's just like hiding behind the next wall. I see Shevachaya is here. Maybe Mashiach is hiding behind one of her beautiful painted walls in Sfat. And I was saying before, Shevachaya, that this week, before my husband's Yahrzeit, is the week that I would, and our whole family would be in Sfat. And it's our first year in so many years not there. So I'm so glad you're here because you're there. And listen, you know, the Holy Land is waiting for all of us, and we need to have the faith that we're going to be there, that Mashiach's going to take us out of this exile and out of this plague that we're in. And it says, how do we do all of this? Okay, this is what we've been waiting for the last hour. And how do we accomplish this? We accomplish it through studying the teachings of Hasidus. And not only studying them, comprehending them and understanding them. And this draws the power of faith into the intellect, and it internalizes it, and it enables it to affect all our potential, causing a deep change inside us. So I want to read a piece of Tanya that concludes that little piece, that sikha that we've been learning. So it says, this is from chapter 5 in Tanya. We're now way past that, but okay. It says, when you do a mitzvahs are the commandments, and when you do the commandment with action, your thought, with your action, with your thought and your speech, it's connected to God, and godly light surrounds you. I can feel that godly light. The mitzvah of learning, of studying, of knowing, of comprehending, of understanding Torah, you understand it with your brain, and that's inside you. So both, you have around you this special unification with God. When you learn, you're connected to a deeper level, and God's wisdom is inside Torah, and it's inside your brain when you're comprehending it. So you're connected to the will and wisdom of God at the same time. So every mitzvah you do surrounds you with godly, holy light, like God is hugging you. And Torah is godliness, and it says God put himself inside the Torah. For instance, if somebody wants water, but they've never heard about ice cubes, and they're really thirsty, and somebody says to them, I have something better for you than water. I have ice cubes. And this person is thinking, why are they giving me rocks? I want water, but it's only water in a different shape. So we know that Torah is infinite light. And we might think, what are they talking about? It's ice cubes. I want Torah. But this is Torah. And we compare Torah to bread. When we eat bread, it becomes one with the body. And Torah becomes one with your mitzvahs. So it says that the garments, remember in the beginning we talked about the clothing, the garments of the soul are thought, speech, and deed of the mitzvahs, the commandments that we do. And learning Torah is the food and we're learning for the sake of God, and we're learning Torah to be connected to God, and we want godliness, and we want our highest level is to become one with God, and that's what we want, and that's what we're desiring in the world today, and we just have to have this super level of faith that we're going to get there, that we're going to, we're going to greet Mashiach. We're going to greet Mashiach. So I want to go on to talk about the Hasidic holiday coming up, but I want to do my commercial again. So I want to just tell everybody who would like, this Sunday morning we are doing a memorial Zoom call for the Yahrzeit of my husband, Shlomo Yitzhak ben Moshe. His Yahrzeit is actually Sunday night, and it will be Sunday night in Israel, when the Zoom call will take place. The Zoom number, I think, was posted on my Facebook page, but I'll just repeat it. It's 466. I know it was posted. I won't repeat it, but I will put it up there. I'll make sure that it's up there. And then next week, again, we're going to do a Tu B'Shvat Seder on Zoom, on that same Zoom address, from 7 to 8:30, and then the Wednesday night class will start at 8:30 instead of 8 next week. And the Tu B'Shvat Seder will be it'll be very, very nice. We have Rabbi Peretz Munchkin. I know his last name is not Munchkin, but I call him Munchkin, who's going to help lead the Seder. I'm going to do some teaching. Yehuda Solomon and Naomi Solomon are going to be speaking a little about Eretz Yisrael, and Dov Rosenblatt is going to be playing some music, and it's going to be a beautiful Tu B'Shvat Seder celebrating the holiness of the land of Israel, and hopefully we'll be there. So, Yud Shvat. So I want to first of all thank everybody. That was a intense learning, and we have some more intense learning. We'll see how much we get through it. I don't think I'm going to do everything that I prepared for the Frierdiker Rebbe's day that he left the world, and it was the day that the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that was our Rebbe, became a Rebbe. And so Yud Shvat this year comes on Shabbos, and Friday night and Shabbos day. There are all sorts of Verbrangens. If you are a young girl or think you're a young girl, I am doing a Verbrangen for young girls in the La Brea area on tomorrow night. Socially distanced, outside, but there will be on Zoom and on Chabad site, COL Live, and on Saturday night on Yossi Jacobson's yeshiva.net. There will be all kinds of Verbrangens and hi Sarah, and beautiful gatherings and teachings about how to bring holiness into our lives, because that was what the Rebbes were about. The Rebbes were about how to bring holiness into lives. So I want to read you a little something that I learned from Fei Yumini, and then we'll go into maybe a sikha by the Rebbe about Yud Shvat, and I'm going to try to summarize it because I am. Okay. So if anybody wants to really study the teachings and come to have the essence of the previous Rabbi Yosef Yitzhak Schneerson, the what we call the Frierdiker Rebbe, that there is a book in English. It's a 4-volume book called Likutei Diburim, which is his writings, and it's just inspirational and quite mind-blowing. There's something else that has just been released that I found just fascinating. It's an interview that was done by Chaim Dolphin with Rabbi Zalman Schachter about the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Hasidus in that time period, in coming from Europe in 770 in New York, and the time that the Rebbe took over as Rebbe, and the whole movement to prove, which is one of the things that the previous Rebbe said, that America is not different. That Torah can be alive and Torah can thrive and will be openly received and will inspire people. And we can see today the tremendous growth of people's souls opening up and wanting to serve God and wanting to have that deep connection and wanting to live as Jews. When I first moved to Los Angeles, there were 2 kosher restaurants. Well, actually, yeah, there was 2 Worlds. I think it was called 2 Worlds, that were run by Burmese brothers that were wonderful. And there was another, like, greasy dive. I can't remember the name of it. I can remember where it was on Beverly Boulevard. And Lila Tov Phyllis, and then the Milky Way opened. So today, well, not today, but let's say today, a year ago, there were like 100 kosher restaurants in Los Angeles because are that many people who have that deep connection to their Jewish roots and soul. So the work of spreading Yiddishkeit and the opportunity to spread it has gone everywhere, and this is in a huge part due to the Lubavitcher, the Frierdiker Rebbe, coming to America and beginning to sending emissaries, as he did in Russia, to send emissaries to every corner of America and the world. You know, you can go to, you can party in Tulum, Mexico, and I think there are 3 Chabad houses there. Okay, so it says that we want to be, that we need to prepare. It's like when Mashiach comes, we want to be ready. You know, we want to be prepared. It's like I have to say that one year we used to go to Chabad house. My husband ran the Seders for like maybe 600 or 700 people, and I had just had a baby, and I really didn't want to go to be with 600 or 700 people for Passover Seder. And so I made a Seder in my house for about 20 people. And I was running the Seder, and it was the first time I had ever learned everything about the Seder and prepared and looked at the Haggadah beforehand and studied. And it was just such a different experience. So we know that preparation can open gates for us, doors for us. So we want to prepare. Mashiach's coming. We want to be prepared. It says that we should return to God one day before our death. So we don't know when our death is. So it means every day you should be returning. We should be returning every day. And it's intrinsic to the work of each of us that when a commandment comes into our hand, we don't delay. That we take it. You know, there's a story of my dear friend Sarah Lydia has been on from Jerusalem. She's one of the first people, 6 a.m. Jerusalem time. She's at class. So one year I was there in Florida, and I came over after Shabbos, and they told me this story that Shabbos that they didn't have any guests. I'm going to just tell a very quick version. I'm just going to tell not even the whole story. Maybe next week I'll tell the whole story because it's a fabulous story. But Shimon saw somebody come into their shul, which was in a hotel. It was in a Ramada hotel. And this man, it was like a minute before Shabbos, and this man runs into the room looking frantic. And Shimon, who usually sits in the back of the shul, for some reason, he doesn't know why, divine providence, he's sitting next to the door. And this man runs in looking frantic, and he says, we're on our honeymoon, and my wife is outside, and the hotel is booked, and we have nowhere to stay for Shabbos, and he's frantic. And what was Shimon's response to himself? He said, I had 30 seconds to grab the mitzvah. And he said, would you like to come and stay at my house? Now, it's a cliffhanger because the story gets much more fun, but you'll have to come next week and I'll tell the rest of the story. But he had 30 seconds to grab the mitzvah. He didn't think, should I, shouldn't I, maybe. What? Do we have enough food? Do we have enough beds? Here's a frantic young man, Hasidic young man. I had 30 seconds. I just love that. Don't delay. When a mitzvah comes to our hands, we have to grab it. Like if you saw a pile of jewels on the floor, would you grab as many jewels as you could? Of course you would. Would you say, I'm going to leave them there. I'll pick them up tomorrow? No, you wouldn't do that. So it says that we have to live a passionate life. We have to live a life with our eyes open and involve. And so this is how the Frierdiker Rebbe lived his life. And to make a dwelling place in the lower worlds for God, to make a dwelling place right where we live for God. Not to say, oh yeah, I heard about that before, let's make a dwelling. No, to actually do it. And that we need to make a dwelling place in this lower world to bring godliness into the world, in our homes, not as a guest, but as a family member dwelling in our homes. And it says that we can only have a revelation of the essence of God when God is at home in the lower world. The upper world already, we know what the upper world is, the godliness world. But it's here in the lower world that we have to make this dwelling place for God. And I just have to say good morning to my daughter, Hindela. Hi, Hindela. Welcome. Our pride and joy who lives in Eretz Yisrael in Jerusalem. Okay, so I'm going to do a small amount of a sikha that the Rebbe, the Lubavitch Rebbe, talked about for Yud Shvat, and we'll see how far we get. So he's talking about that all the Lubavitch Rebbes, he's speaking about his father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, but he's speaking on the level of all Lubavitch Rebbes were involved with everything, absolutely everything. And it says that they each filled the place of their father in every aspect. So it says that each of the Rebbes, though, had a unique influence, a unique interest on something that they concentrated on more than other things. And where does this come from? There is a Talmudic expression that says, what was your father most heedful with? Even though he observed, hi Nomi, thank you, even though he observed all the mitzvahs, he would have a special interest which constituted the gateway of his soul. And it is through this gate that all his Torah and mitzvahs would ascend. I just have to interrupt myself because I see Nomi is here, that I don't know where or who sent it to me, but somebody sent me a picture of you getting a vaccine in Jerusalem. I don't know, I see your name and I'm bringing a tremendous smile because I feel so connected, even when I see names, to people that I miss and I can only imagine and that I want to see. And anyway, thank you. So it says that the Talmud is not saying that there's one mitzvah that was observed to the exclusion of all other mitzvahs, but the Baal Shem Tov explains it in this way. He reads the word heedful, zahir, as an idiom of Zohar, to shine or brighten. And then the question reads like this. With what was your father more heedful means, in what mitzvah did your father sense a greater manifestation of the divine light and illumination? This is what's being asked from Rebbe to Rebbe and from person to person. The Alter Rebbe expands on this, saying that every soul has a particular mitzvah and a particular attribute that's related to them on which they concentrate. And this special place of shining, this special mitzvah, will inspire the person with greater energy and greater vitality to observe all the other mitzvahs. And it says, and it is for this individual their own gateway leading to God, and the gate by which all their Torah and commandments, the mitzvahs and good deeds ascend, and also the gateway through which all the heavenly blessings descend to the person. So this is what's meant by which mitzvah are we shining in. And it says that the different rebbes, being it's Yud Shvat, the different rebbes had different sphirot, the energy emanations, the energy centers that they would shine in, and they all compound into each other. And as I say almost every week, begging people to take this wonderful meditation class that I take out of Sfat with Rabbi Meir Sender called Tal Orot, Talorot. And I can't emphasize enough that when we base the meditations on deep Torah texts and texts of our sages, and we pull from these resources and we meditate on these concepts, it just expands it expands your borders, it expands your mind, it expands your ability to take in all of this that our rebbes are trying to teach us and have been teaching us all through the years. So it says that the Frierdiker Rebbe is called the Baal HaHalula, and means that it refers to a tzaddik, a righteous person, on the anniversary of their passing, but it literally means like a celebrant of a feast or a wedding or something like that. The term comes from the Zohar, and it relates to the great joy of the tzaddik whose soul returned unspoiled to be joined with Hashem. And also there's an element of joy for the tzaddik's disciples and followers like us who share in this joy and who have the benefits of the ascent of this holy person and the connection with this holy person. And we celebrate this Yortzeit. Hasidim celebrated Yortzeit. You don't find Hasidim in a different state. We celebrate the Yortzeit, and that's why we're doing this beautiful memorial service to celebrate my husband this Sunday. We want to celebrate his life. We miss him, and we want to be together, but we celebrate. We're into celebration. We're celebrating holiness, and we're celebrating gifts that are being given to us. So it says there's this element of joy for the tzaddik's disciples and followers who share in the joy, and we reflect on these teachings and instructions for us, and we follow in his ways. And we want to ask that Hashem grant a refuah shlema to Chaim Shneur Zalman ben Hinda Yocheved immediately, and for everybody else who has and needs a refuah shlema and any kind of blessing. And welcome Mimi. So this is so much fun. I get all my friends from Jerusalem are now waking up, or they might have been up and been at work or something like that. I see my friends from New York fading. It's like waves. It's like watching a wave, the people that are coming on this. Okay, so let's go on a little. It says that the Rebbe, both Rebbes, the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe that was our current Rebbe, concern themselves with others no matter what, often providing them with material assistance, not only just with a spiritual favor. Because it says when someone knows that they're the recipient of a material favor, it says that they're affected in a spiritual way also. And so it says Moses was the first shepherd, the first leader of the Jewish nation. And it says that we have a lesson. We say that there's an extension of Moses in every generation. It says that within every tzaddik, within every righteous person and sage that occupies themselves with Torah. And there is not a generation that does not have a person like Moses. So we have to extend kindness, blessing, success. That's what we're extending. We're not reprimanding people. We're not coming down heavy-hearted on people. We're blessing them. We're drawing out the goodness from a person, the light of a person in the world. And we follow this order even when the reproof is something like the golden calf, the worship of the golden calf. It says that when Moses found out about the sin of the golden calf, before he rebuked the people, number one, he prayed for God's mercy to spare the people. Then he cast the tablets out of his hands and he broke them beneath the mountain, because if they hadn't received the tablets of the covenant, they hadn't really formally accepted all of this upon themselves, and they weren't as responsible. And it says that the Frierdiker Rebbe befriended all Jews, even those that are the opposite and are doing things that are going against the will of God. So it's one of the footnotes says that even against heretics, informers, and apostates, that he even befriended everybody. So it says to do a favor for a fellow Jew is a mitzvah. And it says that, and to cause harm is the opposite. That we only try, in Hasidus, we try to look at what's good. We try to say things in the positive. That we don't, with our words even, that we want to elevate people around us and things around us and attribute goodness and good intention to the way people live. It says here that one of the previous Rebbes, the Tzemach Tzedek, explained that there were people who derived vitality and pleasure from executing punishment, and they become inflamed and zealous. And it says they claim to react that way because of their zeal for divinity and their hatred of evil, but in truth, that's not true. They derive personal enjoyment from such behavior. And it says that this is not permitted, that any punishment that comes from Torah is not an act of vengeance, but of mercy. It's to cleanse the person, a medicine to cure the sick soul, because sin is a spiritual disease. And God stands for compassion and kindness. It says, in the light of the king's countenance is life, that no evil descends from above. And it says, this is interesting. Everything's interesting. I don't know why I'm saying this is interesting. It says that a judge must be a compassionate person, capable of finding merit in the other, for even if he has to sentence a defendant to a severe penalty, he himself cannot carry out the sentence. It has to be by a deputy of court. And it says any Sanhedrin, that in a Sanhedrin, one cannot appoint a very aged man nor a eunuch, because these are apt to be wanting in compassion. A member of the Sanhedrin must be a person who is sympathetic. So it goes on to say that Hasidim seek to follow the paths of their Rebbe. We must guard ourselves against things that aren't positive, that things that we want to have compassion and kindness and love. We need to elevate. We need to do it with kindness and even with material favors. And it says, whoever will follow these procedures, this is the Rebbe speaking, will be helped from above to follow the proper path. Because it says the eternal lightens the eyes of them both. It says that the poor man and the man of medium wealth meet together. The eternal lightens the eyes of both of them. So when the pupil questions the teacher and says, teach me Torah, if the teacher teaches Torah, God will lighten the eyes of both of them. The poor man means one devoid of Torah, and a man of medium wealth means one who possesses a moderate amount of knowledge of Torah, and it is incumbent upon him to teach others. Even the Rebbe used to always say, if you know Aleph and Beis, teach Aleph. Don't be afraid to do it. Have courage and go forward in that way. And it will be a gain for both of them. So it says that there is an infinite attribute of supernal chesed will extend to the person, and the person will be provided with a vessel. And it says that what is the vessel? To absorb the divine bounty. So even though I have hundreds of more pages that I prepared, I am really going to end. And there's so much to learn about the previous Rebbe and just about his encouragement and the Rebbe's encouragement in the world. But there is, and in this sikha that the Rebbe is teaching, he's talking about the quality of Mesirat Nefesh, of self-sacrifice, of pushing ourselves, pushing ourselves ahead, making ourselves a little uncomfortable. That, like Avram had people bless God, and it says that Nachshon ben Aminadav jumped into the Red Sea, and the sea split. He didn't know that. He only knew that God said, serve me on the mountain. He did not know that would happen. He was just going forward. And that's what we have to do. And in particular, in this extremely difficult time, we have to go forward. And I just wanted to tell one story that has always very deeply, deeply, deeply touched me about the Frierdiker Rebbe, and then I'll end with a light-hearted story. I just want to say here that, to kind of pull it together, that the condition of the Jewish people at the time of the splitting of the Red Sea, also, we were talking, this whole Sikha is talking about Nachshon and going into the sea, offers a lesson for all generations, and it reflects the avoda, the spiritual work of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who immersed himself in his work with tremendous self-sacrifice and and conferred this capacity to all those that followed in his ways. And it says at the beginning of his leadership, he started with Mesiras Nefesh, and it was at a time when the secret police rampaged throughout Russia. And at a time like this, under such conditions, that it required tremendous self-sacrifice of soul and body to live through this time. And not only did the Frierdiker Rebbe demand it of himself, but he demanded it of his followers. And here's really a story that really touches my heart. I read it many years ago, and I speak of it all the time because to me it really expresses what maybe made me know that I'm a Jew today. Maybe from this. So it says, when Judaism was being crushed and the Jews were being thrown in jail and they were being murdered, killed, murdered, sent to work camps, sent to prison camps for long periods of time and for over many, many years. This is when the Frierdiker Rebbe called in 10 of his students, and they all took an oath, and they all agreed to sacrifice themselves to save Russian Jewry and to make sure that a Jewish child could learn Aleph Beis. And many of them were killed for teaching the first few letters of the Hebrew alphabet and for teaching anything about Judaism. So the story goes, and I used to know the names of the people, but I don't remember what they are right now, that there was a man living in some isolated town in Russia, and he had a minion in his house every single day, and it was under penalty of death. I mean, people had to sneak over there, and if they were caught, they would be tortured, and they would can you imagine? I mean, I just think of it sometimes, that for what we do and how we live our lives, that people could be actually tortured and murdered because they wake up in the morning and they wash Nagelwasser and they say Modeh Ani and they take a prayer book and they say a few prayers and they sing it with their children. For that, you could lose your life. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. And so this man and his wife, they had a minion in their house, and the wife was terrified, and he was also actually terrified that somebody would be followed, and eventually the police would arrest them. And the wife said to her husband, "I can't bear it anymore. You have to go to the Rebbe and tell him we just can't do this anymore. We absolutely can't do this anymore." So the man travels a distance to where the Rebbe was, and he walks into the Rebbe, and the Rebbe's sitting at his desk. And he says to the Rebbe, "Rebbe, I have to tell you that it's impossible. We're terrified. We can't do it anymore. We can't teach these people in our home. We can't have them come for the minyan. We can't do it." And as he's saying to the Rebbe, "We can't do it," the Rebbe is sitting at his desk weeping and saying to this man, "And next you will build a mikveh. And not only will you build a mikveh, but you will accompany the women to the mikveh, and you will teach about the mikveh." And as he's saying it, he's weeping, like, "No, you're not going to stop the minyan, and in addition, here's what the next step is." And because of these great giants of people, the tremendous self-sacrifice in their lives, that so many people had the gift of learning Torah and the gift of being able to still know that they were Jews today. So I want to say l'chaim on my last drop of water, that the Frierdiker Rebbe's yurtzeit and the day that our Rebbe became Rebbe is Friday night and Shabbos day, and that we should really merit to have their energy and their strength and their connection to spread the love of Judaism and to bring light and holiness and joy into the world. And I want to invite everyone to join for my husband's yurtzeit memorial Zoom on Sunday night in Israel when it's actually the yurtzeit. And this year, so many of our friends text me today, if we knew how to get around a police blockade, we would go, but the country is shut down. And so all you holy friends of mine in Svat that are watching, I'm counting on you. You're the people. And we should really just merit to receive Mashiach immediately, that it should happen immediately before Yud Shvat. And then I want to remind everybody, next Wednesday night, we're going to do a Zoom Tu B'Shvat Seder from 7 to 8:30. And then at 8:30, we're going to start the class. So I want to thank everybody once again for coming. And I hate to say goodbye because it's really a highlight of my week. And we should reach out to those who are still not doing well, not having people with them, living alone, being sad, listening to the news, which I highly recommend no one do. And, spend your time and your energy learning Torah. There are Torah partners. We could find even somebody to learn with you one-on-one on the phone if you want. There are so many people willing to make a connection and reach out. And so, anyway, everybody should have a good Yontiv for your Shvat and good Shabbos. And I'll see everybody next week. So thank you so much for coming to the class.